The jungle moon of Varnic 6 was quiet, too quiet. Thick green fog rolled between the trees like living smoke, and the air smelled of rotting wood and cold iron. Nothing moved, no birds, no insects, no creatures at all. It was the kind of silence that only came when something dangerous had arrived, something that didn't belong. A ship had crashed there. Not a military vessel, small science vessel marked with Earth's insignia. The wreckage still smoked. Burned metal, torn wires. The blackened nose of the shuttle had buried itself into the wet ground like a broken tooth. Heat shimmered around the crash site, and yet no rescue had come. No soldiers. Just one survivor, trapped deep in the wreck. Human, male, mid-30s, glasses cracked, blood down one arm, still alive, still breathing, completely alone, or so he thought. High above, a shadow moved in the mist. 7 feet tall, broad shoulders. Scaled armor grown from living bone, a Deathworlder, not human, not even close. It dropped silently from the trees, landing in the mud without a sound. Its face was smooth, dark, with glowing red eyes. It had no weapons. It was the weapon. This was Drask of the Harkowena species designed for war, raised in gravity fields twice that of Earth, born into fire and violence. His kind had never known fear, not once, because no one in the galaxy was stronger. The Laharquin were apex killers, not just predators. They were every species knew their name. Every species ran when they appeared. But today, Drask was here for something new. A test, direct order from the Dominion. Hunt the human survivor. They told him, find out why they do not break. Drask didn't understand it. To him, humans were weak. Soft skin, thin bones, too emotional, too small. But the Dominion feared them, not for their ships, not for their weapons, but for something deeper, something older. So Drask moved through the trees, following the faint trail of crushed grass and human blood. His senses were sharper than any machine. He could hear the human's heartbeat, slow, calm, unafraid. It didn't make sense. He found the human half inside the wreckage, sitting on a piece of broken paneling, wrapping a bandage around his arm with one hand. The man looked up, eyes clear. No panic. No shaking. Dr. Ask stepped into view, towering over the wreck. The human didn't scream, didn't run. He just looked up and said, took you long enough. Drask froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. I'm Lieutenant Harris, the man said. Earth Science Corps. Drask tilted his head. Should be afraid. I should be dead, Harris replied, but I'm not. So let's skip the threats. Drask stepped closer, letting his clawed feet sink into the mud. You know what I am? You're a Harkonnen, Harris said. Engineered killers. Deathworld. Species. Stronger than a bear. Faster than a machine. Your breath smells like sulfur and blood. You've killed thousands. And yet you sit, Drask growled, like I am not standing here. I am sitting, Harris said, because I'm tired. And because I've lived through things your kind can't imagine. Drask narrowed his glowing eyes. You don't fear me, human? Harris stared at him for a long second, then slowly shook his head. No, I don't. For the first time in his life, Drask felt uncertain. He had seen the strongest aliens cry before dying. He had made generals beg. He had destroyed entire bunkers with his bare hands. Fear was always the first thing he saw in his enemies. But not this man, not the human. What are you? Drask asked. Voice lower now. Not a threat, a question. Harris took a deep breath. You think your world is harsh? Earth has tornadoes that rip cities apart. Lightning that can melt your bones. Forests that burn for months. Animals that hunt you in the dark and never leave a trace. We've been killing each other since we had sticks and fire. We kept going. We didn't need to be bred for war. We evolved with it. Drask blinked. Harris continued. You're faster than us, stronger, but that's your limit. We don't stop, we don't quit, and we don't fear the things we can learn too. Understand. You insult me, Drask said, stepping forward. No, Harris said, standing up now, blood still dripping from his side. I'm giving you a choice. You can kill me, but you'll never understand why I'm not afraid. Oh, you can listen. Learn something. Drask's muscles tightened, his claws flexed. I could end this now. Tear the human apart. Report back that they were nothing, but that would be a lie. Because in this moment, he was the one hesitating. He was the one unsure, not the human. And that realization chilled him deeper than any weapon ever had. I was born in fire, said slowly, built to end wars. And I was born in chaos, Harris replied, his voice steady, built to survive everything. A crack of thunder shook the jungle. Rain began to fall, thick, heavy, soaking the earth in seconds. They stood in silence. Two apex creatures from two deadly worlds staring at each other in the storm. And for the first time, Drask didn't feel like the monster in the room. He felt like the student far above. In a stealth drone orbiting the moon, Dominion watchers observed the feed. Audio, visual, heart rate, everything was recorded. One watched Drask pause, watched him listen in, felt unease. Terminate the mission, the officer said. Seen enough, sir, the technician asked. Still alive. He hasn't even I said terminate it now. But down below, neither Drask nor Harris moved, because something deeper was happening. A wall had cracked. A myth had been broken, and the most dangerous question in the galaxy had already been asked. You don't fear me, human? And the answer had changed everything. Rain fell harder now. The jungle hissed beneath it, the thick leaves dripping with water in silence. Drask stood motionless, claws hanging at his side. Red eyes fixed on the wounded human who dared to meet his gaze without blinking. The world around them didn't matter. Only the moment did, the question still hanging between them like a blade in the air. You don't fear me, human? And the answer had been simple. No, I don't. The Deathworlder had expected defiance. He had expected the human to pretend to fake bravery out of pride, that he could understand. But there was no performance in the man's voice, no trembling. No lie, it was the truth, and truth, to someone like Drask, was more terrifying than any weapon. Why? Drask asked. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was unsure, curious. Lieutenant Harris sat down again. One leg stretched out, the other bent. He looked like he was just resting on a beach, not sitting in the wreckage of a crash with a deadly apex predator standing over him. Because, Harris said calmly, I've seen worse. Drask narrowed his eyes. Worse than me? Harris pointed at his chest. This scar. Got it from a creature with no eyes. It hunts by heartbeat. I was 12. We were camping. That thing tore through to tents and dragged my cousin into the river. I stabbed it with a stick until it let go. A stick, Drask repeated, confused. Yep, pointy on one end, fire on the other.
Ow.
Real old school. Drask said nothing. I've been in earthquakes. Harris continued. I lost my home too. A hurricane. Spent 6 months on a volcano research station where the ground shook every other day. You know what the biggest killer on Earth is? Drask tilted his head. Other humans, Harris said. We've been killing each other for millennia. With rocks, with metal, with gas, with words. We built bombs that could wipe out whole continents. And still, we kept going. We kept surviving. The Deathworlder looked down at his own claws soaked in rain, sharp enough to slice metal. You think you're dangerous, Harris said, leaning forward, because you were made to be? Engineered, trained, enhanced. But we didn't get that luxury. We earned every scar, every fear. We adapted to a planet that tries to kill us every day. We did it without losing our minds. Drask took a step back. Your species fights because it must, Harris said. Ours fights because it chooses to. And when we fight for something bigger than ourselves, you should be afraid. Not because we're strong, but because we don't stop. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like distant screams. Drask's fingers twitched. He remembered the old training chambers. The simulations, the endless lectures. Humans are weak, they had told him. Soft, full of emotion, unstable. But nothing about Harris matched those words. He was calm, focused, solid. A strange silence passed between them. It's the kind that usually came before death. But this time, something else filled the space. Respect. You speak like a warrior, Drask said quietly. I'm not, Harris replied. I'm a scientist. I study gas clouds and atmosphere patterns. Drask's eyes widened slightly. You speak of survival like a weapon. Harris gave a tired smile. We've had a lot of practice. The Deathworlder crouched in the mud, sitting across from the human now. This wasn't a standoff anymore. This was a moment rare and honest between two beings from opposite ends of existence. Drask looked into the dark sky. I've killed 27 combatants, 8 machines, 4 war beasts. I was never taught to stop. You don't have to stop, Harris said. You just need to understand why you fight. For honor, Drask said quickly. No, Harris shook his head. That's what they told you. But who benefits when you kill? Who gets more power? Every time you destroy something? Drask didn't answer. That's why they fear us, Harris said. Not because we're monsters, but because we see the game for what it is, and we break it. Drask looked away. He remembered his commanders. Words before the mission. Humans are chaos. Do not let them speak. Too late. In orbit, inside the Dominion command vessel, alarms began to flash. Sir, a technician called out. We're getting irregular biometrics from Drask. Elevated confusion levels. His aggression is lowering. Is the human dead? The commander asked. No, sir. They're talking. The commander slammed his fist into the console. Shut it down. If the Deathworlder starts to question his loyalty, the whole program could collapse. But shut it down. Back on Varnic 6, Drask looked at his claw, then slowly at Harris. You could have run, he said. Why didn't you? Leaned back against the wreckage. I knew you'd come. I wanted to see you for myself, to challenge me. No, Harris said. To understand what scares the galaxy. Drask looked confused. I thought it was your claws, your strength, your speed. But I was wrong, Harris said. What scares them is that you don't know your own story. Drask stood, slowly. The jungle no longer seemed threatening. The fog felt less like poison and more like truth. Somewhere inside him, something old and heavy cracked open. A door, and through it, questions poured in. Who made him? Why? What was he without fear? He turned to leave, but looked back at Harris once more. Next time we meet, Drask said, voice low, I may still be your enemy. Harris nodded. Maybe. But next time you'll know why. Drask vanished into the fog, and for the first time since the program began, a Deathworlder walked away from a kill, not out of weakness, but out of understanding, and in that moment, fear began to change sides. The chamber was dark, cold, and quiet, buried beneath layers of alloy and stone deep inside an old Dominion outpost. Lights pulsed dimly along the ceiling, and the air smelled of disinfectant and machine oil. Inside the main analysis bay, Drask stood motionless in the center of a thick containment field. Scanners buzzed around him. Red lasers mapped his body while invisible rays probed deeper into his nervous system, his brain, his blood. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He barely blinked. He just remembered that human, those words, the silence. Where fear should have been, for the first time in his life, Drask felt something he had no training for. It wasn't pain. He'd suffered that. It wasn't shame. He didn't even know what that meant. It was deeper. Doubt. And that terrified the Dominion more than anything. Behind a thick observation wall, a group of Dominion scientists watched the display in silence. Streams of data floated across their screens. Heart rate low, muscle activity, stable hormonal levels, fluctuating.
But the real concern was mental response. He hasn't spoken since extraction, one of the scientists whispered.
He was supposed to report immediately after the mission. His hesitation is clear. Another added, the human infected him. Infected? Senior officer growled. He wasn't touched. No nanotech. No chemical influence. It's not that kind of infection, the scientist said. The human gave him something worse than a virus. What? A choice? Inside the cell, Drask sat on a steel bench, his huge arms resting on his knees. Around him, holograms flickered footage from his past missions, victories, executions, destruction. These were meant to remind him of what he was: a weapon, a force, a tool. He watched them all. But something was wrong now. They didn't feel like triumphs anymore. They felt like memories from a different life. He had never known his mother. The Harkonnen didn't have families. They were born in gene chambers, pulled from vats as screaming infants, and thrown into fire trials by the age of 5. Drask remembered fighting for food, for sleep, for breath. Not out of cruelty, but because it was the way. Survival made strength. Strength made weapons. Weapons made victory. The instructors had taught him to crush his enemies without hesitation, to silence the weak, to never ask questions. But that human hadn't just refused to fear him. He had talked to him as if he was more than claws and teeth, as if he could be something else. Drask closed his eyes. The human's voice echoed in his mind. You think you're dangerous because you were made to be, but we didn't get that luxury. We earned every scar. Draska's fingers curled tightly, claws digging into the bench. What if we were never allowed to earn anything? The thought had never entered his mind before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't rebellion. It was awakening. The doors to the observation deck opened with a hiss. 2 figures entered. A Dominion commander in full armor and a sleek woman in dark blue robes, the mind specialist. He's compromised, the commander said. You'll begin full memory extraction. The woman nodded once. If he resists, wipe and reset. The woman hesitated, sir. He's not just confused. Something changed in him. Deeply, the human spoke to something buried inside. If we reset him now, then he'll be useful again. And if he resists, she asked, then we kill him. He's just another Harkonnen unit. Back in the cell, the lights dimmed. Drask stood slowly. He could smell them coming. The sedative mist hissed through the vents, sweet and heavy. He didn't fight it. He let it pull him down, his body collapsing in silence, his mind falling into darkness. But as it did, he remembered Earth. He'd never been there, never seen it. But in the human's voice, he'd felt it. A world where life fought every day, where fire didn't destroy it forged, where even the weakest survived storms no machine could measure. And it made him wonder, what was I made to be? And what could I become instead? He awoke in a dream, not a simulation, a memory that wasn't his. He stood on black soil. Trees twisted in the wind, lightning flashed in the distance. A massive beast roared in the valley below. But no fear touched him, because someone was beside him, a figure in human armor. Helmet off, comm steady. Harris, you're not broken. The human said. I am, Drask replied. No, Harris said. You were never whole to begin with, but now you've seen the cracks. That's where the light gets in. What is this? Drask asked. A gift, Harris said. Your mind is fighting to protect you. They want to erase this moment. But you're stronger than that. Why are you helping me? 'Cause one day, Harris said, fading into mist, you might be the one standing between the galaxy and something worse. The wind blew hard, the ground shattered, and Drask woke up screaming. Back in the analysis chamber, lights flared. Restraints snapped. Drask was standing, eyes wild, chest heaving, but not with rage. With purpose, the Dominion guards rushed in, guns drawn. Orders shouted, but he didn't move. He just looked up and said, for the first time in his life, no, Aden. In that single word, something broke. Not inside him, but inside the entire system that made him, because the monster had just chosen not to be one, and monsters aren't supposed to choose. Above the moon of Varnic 6, blackness of space rippled as 3 stealth-class Earth vessels dropped from quantum shift. They made no sound, no signal, just a cold, sudden presence, like sharks gliding through deep water. At their center was the flagship Asir, A mobile operations command ship armed with every defensive system. Earth's military had perfected in silence over decades. Commander Soraya Weller stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the data stream from Lieutenant Harris's distress beacon. The signal had been faint, nearly overwritten by local interference, but it was there. It hadn't moved, which meant Harris was alive or captured. Landing teams are ready, her operations officer reported. 5 minutes to ground breach. No weapons fire, she ordered. Not unless provoked. No. I want eyes on Harris and intel on whoever found him. Quiet and fast. The Dominion thought humans only responded to threats with force. They were. Wrong. Humans responded with precision. On the jungle surface, heat shimmered above the wreck of the science shuttle. The foliage had begun to reclaim it, green vines curling through shattered hull panels. Harris was going to take in hours ago. But the wreck still held clues. Blood trails, burn marks, and a single strange imprint in the soil. Not human, heavy-clawed. Deathworlder, a team of Earth operatives in camo adaptive armor scanned the site silently, weapons low but ready. At the edge of the crater, Sergeant Elric knelt beside a drag mark. He was taken north, Elric said into Cums. Looks like he went peacefully. Looks like he went peacefully. Or was unconscious, another replied. Negative, Elric said. No. Struggle. This wasn't a hunt. This was contact. Above them, drones spread through the canopy, sending live feeds to AESI. Commander Weller watched one of them with narrowing eyes. There she said. Playback frame 43. Grainy shot. A figure too large to be human stepping out of the mist, towering, armored, red-eyed. Deathworlder, Weller said grimly. Confirmed. What's a Harkoon doing this far out? Her aide asked. Testing us, she said. Or being tested. She tapped the cum, set full planetary lockdown. No Dominion vessels leave orbit. If they make a move, I want them. Boxed in. I want this quiet. Back in the Dominion outpost, Drask sat in silence. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't watched. They thought that sedatives would keep him still. They thought wrong. The dream, if it was a dream, still echoed in his head. The human's words were louder than any order the Dominion had ever given him. You were never whole to begin with. But now, you've seen the cracks. That's where the light gets in. He didn't know what the light was, but he knew what. The cracks felt like now. Every mission he'd ever been sent on. Every voice that called him weapon, not warrior. Every command that had no reason except because we said so. It all felt hollow now. He didn't want to obey anymore. He wanted to understand. And that was the most dangerous desire a Deathworlder could have. On the outskirts of the facility, a soft pop hissed through the air as an Earth team breached the perimeter with signal disruptors.
All scared.
No lights flared. They didn't need an army. They needed only a door. Lieutenant Harris awoke in a bright room. Medical scanners hovered over his chest. A soft hum vibrated through the floor. His arm was clean, wrapped, healing. He sat up quickly and froze. Drask was sitting across from him, not armed, not angry, just waiting. You're awake, Drask said. Harris blinked. Why am I not dead? Drask's jaw flexed. Because I listened. Dominion won't like that, Harris muttered. Trying to stand? I know, Drask said. A moment passed. Why didn't you run? Drask asked. I didn't know which way to go. I would have told you. Harris looked at him. You're not the same as before. Drask nodded once. Neither are you. Then the door exploded inward. Earth operatives rushed in, weapons. Raised Harris threw up his hands. Wait, don't shoot. Drask didn't move. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply raised his hands slowly, clearly. Commander Weller entered last, eyes flicking from Harris to the towering Harkoon. Report. He's not hostile, Harris said quickly. He saved me. That's not possible, one of the soldiers muttered. Weller raised an eyebrow at Drask. What do you want, Drask? Didn't hesitate. Truth. Back on the Aesir, Hours later, Drask stood inside a containment field not for security, but out of protocol. Earth didn't take chances. Yet as Harris explained what had happened, his words simple, firm, and impossible to dismiss, Weller saw something that changed everything. The Harkoon wasn't lying. He wasn't broken. He was awake, and if one of them could change, maybe more could. Maybe the galaxy wasn't ruled by fear anymore. Maybe it was ruled by the first one brave enough to ask, why? At Dominion High Command, a red alert pulsed through shadowed halls. Harkoon Unit 117 has defected. Human contact confirmed. Psychological contamination suspected. Protocol Omega now in effect. They didn't understand how it had happened, but they knew what it meant. Humans had done the impossible. They had made a Deathworlder question obedience. And that was the beginning of a storm that couldn't be stopped. The stars above Varnax 6 shifted subtly, and the darkness of space grew heavier. There was no flash, no thunder, just a quiet change like the ocean pulling back before a wave. The Dominion had arrived. Their flagship, the Judicator's Spear, slipped out of quantum fold with precision honed over centuries of conquest. Black as obsidian, its surface shimmered with cloaking plates and power fields. It didn't announce itself. It didn't need to. It was presence alone. Everything beneath it, planet, city, species, felt that weight, the way prey feels a predator watching from the dark. But on the bridge of the Aesir, Commander Soraya Weller didn't flinch. She stood with arms behind her back watching the scans. Roll across the holodisplay. Dominion warship in high orbit, her ops officer confirmed. They're trying to jam our comms and shield our signal to Earth Command. Let them try, Weller said calmly. Route the fallback uplink. To tight beam relay, passive observation only. We don't shoot first. The Dominion had sent their answer. Earth had just begun its question. In a secure briefing room deep inside the Aesir, Drask stood unchained, flanked by 2 Earth Marines. His red eyes flicked. To the wall display, Dominion warship above. He didn't need to ask why it was there. They're not here to talk, he said. They're here to erase. Lieutenant Harris leaned forward across the table. Erase you, or us. Both, Drask replied. They consider me broken, contaminated. Your presence is a threat to their order. Commander Weller stepped into the room. Her uniform was spotless, her expression unreadable. We've picked up encrypted bursts from their side, she said. They've launched 2 stealth shuttles. It's landing within the hour. It's a target unknown, but I think we both know who they're coming for. Drask nodded slowly. They'll use assassins. Not soldiers. They don't want a war. They want a disappearance. Then we don't let them disappear you, Harris said. Weller looked between them. I need to know what you are now, Drask. Are you one of them, or something new? Drask took a long breath. I don't know yet. But I know I don't want to go back. Why? Weller asked. Drask's answer was quiet but firm. Because for the first time in my life, I want to choose. 30 minutes later, the jungle night returned to silence only. Now it was tense, electric. Earth teams deployed motion beacons. Around the perimeter of the Aesir's ground outpost, cloaked and waiting, the Dominion shuttle broke atmosphere with barely a ripple. No lights, no signal. Its black hole shimmered like a shadow. It landed 2 kilometers out and released 4. Units silent, armored, fast. They moved through the jungle like ghosts. They didn't know Drask was watching. From above, in the trees, silent as the grave, he dropped behind the lead assassin and snapped his neck before the others realized what had happened. The second turned, raising a plasma blade only to be crushed into the ground by Drask's full weight. The third tried to run. Drask didn't chase. He simply threw a piece of shattered hull metal, whistled through the air, and struck the assassins. Spine, he collapsed, twitching. Only one remained. Blast had stopped. Frozen, and Drask walked out of the mist toward him. You came for the thing I used to be, he said. But that creature's gone. The assassin raised a blade. Drask didn't move. Go back. Tell them what you saw. Or try to kill me and prove you've learned nothing. The assassin's hand trembled. Then slowly, he lowered the blade and ran back on the Aesir. Harris watched the drone feed in silence. You gave him a chance. Drask didn't look at him. He won't take it. Why give it at all? Drask finally turned. Because no one gave me one, until you. Above them, on the bridge of the Dominion warship, the commander watched. The failed mission log with burning eyes. He spared them. He hesitated again. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, it's not just weakness. He's different, thinking independently. If others follow his example, they won't, the commander snapped. We end this before it spreads. He tapped the command console. Begin orbital cleansing. Emot the human base vaporized. Within the hour, sir? That's an act of war? Then so be it. On the Aesir, emergency alerts flashed red. Energy spike detected. An officer shouted, They're charging main batteries. Weller didn't blink. Launch countermeasures. Activate diplomatic protocols. And if that fails, then we show them what Earth really is. Drask stood with Harris at the forward viewport, watching the enemy warship prepare its strike. They're coming, Harris said. Drask's voice was low. Then let them come. Because now he wasn't just a weapon anymore, he was choosing his side, and for the first time, it was not the one above him, it was the one beside him. The stars seemed to hold their breath. Deep, terrible silence stretched between the Dominion warship and the Earth vessel Aesir. Lights blinked, energy readings spiked. Dub. Both ships hovered above the jungle moon like titans preparing for a death blow. But inside the Aesir, no one moved without purpose. Every soldier, every system, every breath was waiting for Commander Weller's word. Dominion ship has charged its main weapon, reported the tactical officer. 70% and rising. Earth Command is still silent. We're on our own, Combs added grimly. Commander Weller stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes sharp, cold, but steady. Bring our shields to full.
I'll load interceptors.
Arm railguns. Then she glanced at Drask. He stood still, silent, but something inside him was alive, burning. They're going to destroy you, she said quietly. No, Drask said. They're going to try. Cross the Dominion fleet. High Command. Watched in fury, they had sent warnings. They had issued orders. And now, one of their most lethal creations, Drask, a Harquinst shoulder to shoulder with a human. Worse, he wasn't just standing with them, he was defending them. Unit 117 has failed containment. Psychological corruption confirmed. Signal blocked, reclamation aborted. Expected silence from the other Harkoon units. Obedience. But instead came a voice from one of the outer colonies. A war front. It was another Harkoon. We received your order. We reject it. The Dominion officers froze. A second signal. Then a third. Unit 303 no longer recognizes Dominion. Control. We choose to think. We choose to speak. The fear ends now. Within an hour, 32 Deathworlder units across 8 sectors had disconnected from the Dominion command net. And every one of them sent the same message to Earth, Drask. Showed us the human, made us see. We are not weapons. We are people. Sidasir's war room. The message played on repeat. The officer stared at the map of stars once red with enemy markers, now turning gold with Allied signals. There, switching sides, Harris whispered. All over the galaxy. They were never loyal, Drask said, only controlled. You broke the chain. Harris shook his head. I didn't break it. You did. I just asked a question. Drask turned to Weller. They attack now. They're not just attacking you. They're attacking us all. Weller nodded once. And we don't run. In orbit, the Dominion ship fired. A brilliant pulse of blue energy cut through the blackness of space, racing toward the jungle moon below. The shot could have cracked. Mountains, boiled oceans, erased cities. But it never landed. At the last second, a swarm of invisible satellites hacked and redirected by Human A is blinked into position, projecting a massive kinetic shield that bent the beam into fragments. Debris rained across the upper atmosphere like shooting stars. On the bridge of the Aesir, cheers erupted. But Weller raised a hand. Quiet. This isn't over. And she was right. The Dominion had fired the first shot. Now, the galaxy was watching. What happened next was never part of Earth's plan. It wasn't war. It was revolution. Within days, Harkonnen warriors all over Dominion space stopped obeying orders. Ships refused to fire. Garrisons stood down. Some even turned there. Weapons on their Dominion masters, not out of vengeance, but to protect civilians, to stop genocide, to say no more. The Dominion tried to contain it with lies, with executions, with fear, but fear only works when people believe in the cage. And now they had seen the lock break. They had seen a Deathworlder ask, "You don't fear me, human?" Had heard the reply, "No, I don't." In a speech broadcast across open galactic channels, Drask stood beside Commander Weller and Lieutenant Harris. He spoke simply. His voice was rough, deep, but it carried truth. I was made to kill. But I have learned to question. Dominion told me I had no right to choose. But a human showed me that choice is where life begins. I am not a weapon. I am not a slave. I am a Deathworlder, and I am free. Across millions of systems, those words echoed. They weren't poetry. They were a match, dropped into dry grass, and the fire spread. In the Dominion capital, the High Council fell silent. Their once mighty network, built on terror and control, had been fractured by a single unexpected variable. A human who didn't run, a Deathworlder who learned to feel, and a galaxy no longer afraid. Back aboard the Aesir, Harris leaned on. The railing outside the observation deck, staring into the stars, Drask joined him, silent for a while. "You know," Harris said quietly, "I never thought talking to you would change anything." "It changed me," Drask replied. "Was enough." "You started a war." "No," Drask said. "I started a conversation," and the galaxy had answered. In the cold void between stars, the Dominion's War Council gathered for the first time in centuries. They met on an ancient dreadnought buried in black space, hidden from known jump routes. Each member appeared as a flickering projection around. The war table shadowy outlines with burning eyes. Some were pure AI, others were barely alive, sustained by machines and rage. But they all shared one goal now: erasure. The humans are the root, the High Executor growled. They infect order with chaos. Worse, added the fourth mind, a being of linked intelligence clusters. They make our weapons think. Feel. Question. We must strike, the Grand Admiral hissed. Not with fear, but with finality. No message, no survivors. They approved Project Silent Ash, a weapon never used before, not just destructive, but erasing. A quantum entropy cascade, designed to burn not only planets, but data, memory, history, the target Earth. On the Aesir days had passed since the Harkonnen revolt spread across the stars. Dozens of former Deathworlders had defected. They arrived on battered ships. Some limped in. Others came alone in escape pods. They weren't conquerors anymore. They were refugees of thought, inside a growing Alliance hub aboard the ship. Earth officers worked alongside newly freed Harkonnen, planning routes, finding survivors, and building something that had never existed. Before trust between species born of war. But Harris's new peace was never safe for long. He stood in the command dome, scanning new signals. "That's not a normal energy reading," he said, frowning. Drask stepped beside him, his eyes narrowing. "No, that's a Dominion beacon, but it's wrong." Weller arrived a second later. "What is it?" Harris answered quietly. "It's not a weapon. It's something worse. They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to erase us." In the edge systems, planets went dark. Whole colonies vanished. No debris, no signals. Just silence at first. The Alliance thought it was jamming. Then one message leaked through, weak and cracked, barely a whisper. "They're deleting us. They're deleting us." The Dominion wasn't just fighting a war anymore. They were trying to rewrite reality. Drask met with Weller and Harris in the strategy vault. The mood was tense, quiet but determined. "They've stopped pretending," Weller said. "No more diplomacy. This is a purge. They can't reach Earth directly, Harris added, pulling up a rotating star map. But they've found another path through the Kren Belt. It's unstable, hard to navigate, but with the right ship. They'll be over Earth in 2 days, Drask said. Weller didn't blink. Then we don't wait. We intercept. A fleet of Earth warships and Harkonnen defectors launched from the moon's orbit like iron wasps. No speeches, no war drums. Just resolve. It's a kind of silence that comes before thunder. As they approached the Kren Belt, sensors picked up strange signals, twisted space, quantum echoes. One pilot whispered, "This place isn't right." And it wasn't. The Dominion had planted entropy mines here, devices that didn't explode, but unwrote. A scout ship brushed too close and simply ceased to exist, vanished, as if it had never been built. Drask stared into the chaos. They don't want to win. They want the galaxy to forget we ever fought back. Harris devised a risky plan. Would ride a cloaked scout ship ahead of the main fleet, slip into the Dominion carrier's blind spot, and disable the entropy core before it could fire? It was nearly suicidal, so of course he volunteered. "I'm the reason they're doing this," Harris said to Weller. "They fear what you let me say." Weller frowned. "This isn't your burden alone. It started with a question," Harris said. "It ends with an answer." Drask stood beside them, and I'm going with him. Weller hesitated, then nodded. "Bring him back." As they neared the carrier, the scout ship cloaked, diving through distorted space like a needle. In a storm? Inside the small cockpit, Harris sat in silence. Drask beside him, quiet, focused. "What if we fail?" Harris asked. "Then they erase 2 more lives," Drask replied. "But they can't erase what we started." They'd breached the hangar silently, moved through dark corridors thick with energy static. Every Dominion drone, every guard they passed, was blind to them until they reached the entropy core chamber. The air shimmered. Time felt wrong. "This is it," Harris whispered. "Machine designed to make it like we never existed." Drask stared at it and did something unexpected. He spoke into the coms. "To all Harkonnen who still listen, I am not dead. I am not silent. The Dominion wants to make you forget me, forget yourselves, but you have the power to choose." Did, like we all can. Across the galaxy, Harkonnen rebels heard him and responded. Dozens of ships lit up. Thousands of voices repeated, I remember, I choose." The entropy weapon began to crack under its own logic. Dominion code was built on certainty, obedience, order, but now it was facing memory. Choice, truth. That is its weakness. And Harris saw the gap. He hit the overload switch. The entropy device folded inward, collapsing in a silent flash, not with an explosion, but with a resistance that couldn't be erased. Back on the Aesir. A wave of relief washed over the crew. "The core is down," Weller said. "Earth is safe." But more importantly, the idea survived in the stars. The Dominion's grip cracked. Their last weapon had failed. Not because humans were stronger, not because Deathworlders, but because someone dared to say, "You don't fear me, human." And someone had answered, "No, I see you." And that, in the end, was what the Dominion could never delete. The stars were no longer quiet. Across the spiral arms of the galaxy, a wave moved, not of ships, or soldiers, or weapons, but of awakening. The Harkonnen, once the Dominion's greatest weapons, had become something else. Not enemies, not monsters, but voices, choices. People, and at the center of that storm stood 2 figures. One, a human scientist who had refused to show fear. The other, a former Deathworlder who had refused to obey. Their names were spoken in secret camps, in rebel fleets, in broken colonies. Harris and Drask, the man who didn't run, the monster who learned to stand. On the bridge of the Aesir, Commander. Weller watched the final fragments of the Dominion carrier drift through space like dead stars. The entropy core was gone. Earth was safe for now, but she knew what came next wasn't peace. It was the reckoning. They'll regroup. she said to her officers. They'll retaliate. We've humiliated them. Harris stood behind her, still bruised from the mission, still exhausted but calm. Let them come, he said. They've already lost. Drask stood outside the hangar, gazing out at the stars. His armor was scorched, his claws cracked, but he looked taller than ever, not just in body, but in presence. For the first time, he knew who he was, not a tool, not a beast, a voice. And that voice was calling others to rise. Within a week, Earth's alliance received messages from dozens of former Dominion slave species, miners, builders, warbred creatures. Some had lived entire lives thinking they were born only to serve. Now they saw hope. Now they saw fire. Now they saw a future. The Dominion tried to control the message-blocking channels, blacklisting names, threatening any world that spoke of the human event. But it was too late. The words had already spread. You don't fear me, human? No, I see you. The phrase was painted on the sides of rebel ships, etched into armor, tattooed on skin, woven into songs. It became more than a sentence. It became a declaration. On a fringe world in the Dominion core, a group of young Harkonnen gathered in secret. They'd all been trained the old Wayno questions. No choice. But tonight, one of them played a recording. It was Drask's voice. Fear is not strength. The first real battle begins when you choose to ask, who am I without them? They didn't answer, but none of them reported it. That was the first rebellion. Back on the Aesir, Earth's leadership sent a message. Do we strike? Do we press? The advantage? But Weller answered no. We hold the line. Let the galaxy come to us, not in chains, but in truth. And so Earth did not become an empire. It became a spark, in a quiet room beneath the main deck. Harris and Drask sat across from each other again, just like that first day on Verno K-6. No. Jungle this time. No weapons between them. Just silence. And a shared past. Funny, Harris said. We started with a crash. We started with a question, Drask corrected. One, I didn't know I was afraid to ask. And now, Drask looked out the viewport. Now I know fear isn't weakness. It's the beginning of knowing who you really are. Harris leaned back, smiling faintly. You think they'll ever stop hunting us? No, Drask said. But they'll never hunt us the same way again. In the Dominion capital, the council was fractured. 3 seats empty. Dozens of command signals. Blocked or hijacked by Harkonnen uprisings. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion faced something it could not predict. A storm of thought, of belief, of defiance. The High Executor snarled as new reports came in. More units defected. Another world refused orders. Another Deathworlder claimed independence. The fourth mind pulsed with static. We are losing control. And in that moment, the Dominion realized what had happened. Not just betrayal, not just rebellion, evolution across the stars. As Dominion warships fell back and new alliances formed, a message appeared in every corner of every system carried by ancient satellites whispered through old cum relays. We are the ones who chose. We are the ones who saw. We're not afraid. We are the storm. And we began with a single question. You don't fear me, human? And the answer that changed? The galaxy, no, I never did.